The Continuing Education Department of Florida Atlantic University is currently conducting a workshop entitled Music for Young People. The clinicians for this week of activities are Jim and Mary Helen Solomon of Jacksonville, Florida. Jim is a music teacher at Evelyn Hamlin Elementary School in St. Augustine, as well as being an adjunct instructor at Jacksonville University. Mary Helen, his wife, teaches at St. Paul's by the Sea, also in Jacksonville. They've both had extensive training in the Orff Schulwerk approach to teaching music. Jim is president and founder of the North Florida Orff chapter, and they've just returned from Salzburg, Austria, where they toured with other Orff teachers. Dr. Kenneth Robinson was involved with the Ball State University Orff Schulwerk program in the early 60s and has conducted Orff workshops in many of the states in the United States, as well as in Europe. I'd like to begin our discussion by asking Jim and Mary Helen, what particular experience did you have which attracted you to the Orff approach to music education? Jim, would you like to begin?
Sure. Two experiences, really. The first was that when I was teaching classroom, I am also a conga drummer and a percussionist, so I took my instruments in, and I saw how much the kids loved to play percussion instruments. The second thing is that I worked with a lady named Mary Ruth Milner, who was the supervising music teacher in San Mateo County in California. And she is an Orff teacher. And I saw how she got her classes involved with music and how much they loved to do the activities that she was doing with them.
And then when I met Jim, that is pretty much how I became familiar with Orff. I was teaching Yamaha Music School, which is a very active way of teaching young children. And I, having a classical background, was very interested in teaching theory, and sometimes would get so carried away that I'd forget I was teaching children almost. And as I learned more about the Orff approach, I realized that since children are such active people, they have to have an active approach. And so when Jim and I met, I realized that that was more the direction I would like to go and teach children using an active approach. Not that the Yamaha was not, but the way I was doing it with the children, it was.
Did this Ms. Milner, was she an Orff-trained teacher?
Yes. Mm-hmm. She's currently in an Orff chapter out in California, in San Francisco, and has been encouraging the schools in her district to get sets of Orff instruments for years now, and has been training classroom teachers there in how to use the instruments with the children.
Now, a lot of people who may be watching this film may wonder, what is Orff? You want to tell us a little bit about Karl Orff?
Sure. Karl Orff is a German who just passed away at the age of 86 years old. Passed away last March. He is a composer. He's done many different things. He's worked with plays, but what he will be most known for is his role as a music educator, I think. He's developed an approach to teaching music to children that emphasizes activity, as Mary Helen was saying. And he has 5 volumes of music for children published, as well as classical music, Carmina Burana, that many of you may have heard of. So Orff has had an intense impact in a very short time. He passed away at the age of 86, but his books have already been translated into over 20 languages. And his approach to teaching music to children has spread all around the world now.
I noticed in attending the workshops this week,
right,
you kept emphasizing the fact that this is an approach rather than a method. Do you want to expound on that a little?
Yes. A method is an exacting thing where there's a first step, a second step, and a third step. The Orff approach is just an approach, whereas it has many, many guidelines, but does not say that the teacher must first do this and then do this and then the next thing.
And it gives the teacher an opportunity to be very creative, that if you feel like the children need more of something or other, you could go to it and work on it.
Yeah. There's a lot of flexibility. It really emphasizes teacher creativity as well as children's creativity.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think it, not only is it a lot of fun, but it's a very constructive thing for teachers to use because they can continually develop on their own.
I was thinking as I sat there, or as I was working with you, that it must take an awful lot of energy to be an Orff teacher.
It takes some energy, but the fun and the energy that the children give back to you with their response feeds you. It gives you more energy as you go along. In the workshop, the response of the people and the way that they have participated has kept us going quite a bit.
Dr. Robinson, do you have any comment to make on the Orff, on what we've been talking about?
Perhaps I could just add that there is a teacher's manual, as you know, that goes along with the textbooks, as I call them, or just resource materials. The manual is, like you said, it's just a guide. It just doesn't spell it out, but it does help the teacher in teacher's approach to teaching. I would like to add that Karl Orff's philosophy includes the whole concept of trying to allow the child to be creative through these experiences and hopefully produce sensitive consumers and producers of music.
Does the Orff approach, I noticed you mentioned Jean Piaget in your class notes and in your talking, and
Yes.
What does Piaget say about this approach? Or do they conflict in any way?
No, Piaget defines the approximate ages of 6 to 11 years old as a stage of concrete operations. Basically, that means that children of those ages, elementary school ages, need concrete experience to make knowledge meaningful to them. So the Orff approach emphasizes activity, concrete activity, not abstractions. And we have activity in so many different areas that we feel that Piaget's theories and Orff's theories go together hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. The question comes to me is, does everyone have musicality? You turn around and you look and you say, should we educate only these people who carry a tune and who have very good rhythm, high hand coordination? Or is Orff for everyone? Or
I think
what?
it would be unfair to exclude certain people from having a chance to work on developing their musicality. I think everyone has potential to, at least they have their own potential and they can go to that. And the Orff approach tries very hard to incorporate everyone into the music making. If they're unable to play a certain part, there's always another part available. There's instrument playing, movement and singing and dancing. There are so many different things that they can attempt to try at least. And Orff is not so much interested in the product either as it is in the process and in the growth of the child.
We might also add that Karl Orff, I think, had a lot to do with working with handicapped children, mm-hmm. or students who were mentally retarded or who had learning disabilities. And the whole area of music therapy, I think, fits in beautifully with the Orff approach to teaching music to children.
Especially when you're not stressing product.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
in addition to what Dr. Robinson was just saying, we just returned from a week-long workshop where we were in Vienna before we went to Salzburg. And present at the workshop was Klaus Bang from Denmark, and he is one of the best-known music therapists in the world, and he uses the Orff approach in his approach to therapy with deaf children, with autistic children, and retarded children. So the Orff approach is used with handicapped children.
And that's especially significant today with our mainstreaming and the public laws that are on the books to bring all of the children into the classroom mm-hmm. at the same time. So through this we can meet their individual needs at all these varying degrees of abilities and their ability to think through problems, and this is one way to approach all of these different learning problems.
You mentioned mainstreaming, and it seemed to me you made a statement the other day about Klaus Bang was opposed to mainstreaming. Was that?
He liked to mainstream the normal children in with the children with the special problems, right? Because so often the ones with the problems aren't able to compete and keep up, and therefore they don't have such a good feeling about themselves. I mean, even though in the Orff method we try to supply all the different parts, it's to him, he thinks it's a little bit too evident that these children, you know, if there's one hearing impaired child in a group of hearing children, they feel different. And I think he was very concerned about their feelings. And so he likes to take the children who are, quote, normal and have a few of them in with the others. And I think it's a good learning experience for everyone.
Develop compassion, patience, and things like that.
Yes, and patience very much. Another thing about the Orff approach, this may be what you're about to say, is that it concentrates so much on the physical development. Like we try to use so much movement to help the children respond to music and to understand it. And I think just the physical nature of the approach itself helps the development of so many children that have those special problems.
Along with that, one reason why Orff is so effective with normal children as well as children who need more help is the fact that it works through so many learning modalities. There's a lot of talk these days about children who learn visually or auditorily or tactily. The Orff approach utilizes all of those, plus the kinesthetic in its approach to teaching children. So what we have is a multi-dimensional approach to working with children. And it's not a sit and sing approach, which has been done in the past so traditionally. Orff teachers do a lot of singing, but as Mary Helen mentioned, we do movement, we do instrument playing, we do speech, we do improvisation, emphasis on improvisation and creativity, as you mentioned earlier.
Well, this leads to this question here, is why don't more educators demand this type of program for children, if it does the things that you say?
I think it's because it's so new. Orff started publishing books for children and making radio broadcasts in the late 1940s. That's a very short time in the time of world history.
As a matter of fact, Studio 49 came out in 1949, and this is the company that manufactured and distributed the instruments that Orff had designed or set the specifications for. So it was late 49 before the instruments even came out.
Right. So that's only slightly more than 3 decades ago. And if we're talking about an approach that has spread around the world and been translated into over 20 languages in slightly more than 3 decades, that's a tremendous achievement. It's not a fad. It's something that's here and that it is growing. But in the United States, we have only had the American Orff Schulwerk Association, I believe, for less than 20 years now.
Yes, the first Orff workshop was in Toronto, I believe, in 1960 or 61.
You mean North America?
In North America, right. And then the first one in the United States was at Ball State University the year after, which I believe was 1961. So, again, we're talking about very few years of exposure. And it has really grown. When you look in the Music Educators Journal or the Instrumentalist Magazine, you'll find Orff workshops being conducted throughout the United States now. So the word is getting out.
One of the things that this leads to is what kind of a person makes a good Orff teacher?
I think it's somebody who has to be really interested in the growth of children.
I mean, no prima donnas, you mean? Musician.
Well, somebody who wants the children to be active in their learning and who is really interested in the growth of children and is willing to do some study on learning about the Orff approach and other approaches as well. One nice thing about the Orff approach that I've found is that Orff teachers who I know are very willing to learn from other approaches. They take a very eclectic approach.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Jim. I was just going to point out that I would not recommend that any teacher simply utilize the philosophy and the approaches of Orff in their music teaching. There are too many other important approaches, and this word eclectic, I think, is what we have to think about and look at to develop a total program of musical experiences for children. But certainly, the Carl Orff approach has proven itself to be valuable, as has the Suzuki with the string method, the Kodai approach, and Manhattanville, other approaches to teaching. So the thing we're trying to get away from, I guess we could say quickly, is that we don't want the children simply singing songs all the time. We don't want them just simply listening to records. As both of you have pointed out, this is a participatory program, and in partial answer to your question, anyone really could learn to use many aspects of Orff in their teaching. It shouldn't be limited to just those people that might be classified as creative teachers. We're all creative if given the opportunity to develop in that direction.
One point to follow that up.
Right.
We have met teachers in Orff workshops who felt like they personally had very little creativity.
Sure.
At the end of a 2-week period of time, we've talked with those teachers, and they have recognized a growth within themselves of the ability to create things, because we emphasize group creativity, individual creativity.
It's confidence building.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So people who feel like they aren't a creative teacher, it's locked in there somewhere.
The first thing to do is lose some of our inhibitions. I remember the first time I attended an Orff workshop, I had to take my shoes off. Well, that's traumatic for a person who doesn't normally take his shoes off in public. But after the first few minutes, it felt pretty good, and we went right on from there.
Isn't that where we met?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I was running around the ballroom with my shoes off, and next thing I know, he called me and asked me if I was interested in teaching.
Yes, you must have had good looking feet or something. I don't know.
I think I was asked.
Right away.
I think I was asked to be a tree or something. I was a good tree, and you hired me on that basis. What would you recommend to an individual who would like to find out more about Orff Schulwerk? What kind of a thing could somebody take on? What kind of experience do you need to become more effective in this approach?
Well, I think there are so many workshops being offered now in the country.
Now, you mean workshops. That's almost sound like a cheap credit to some people. They say workshop, and that doesn't sound very academic or very
there are many
professional.
Intensive teacher training courses going on.
Oh, yes.
And I call it intensive because you go and you work all day.
And then at night.
And then at night on your homework, exactly. And it's the way, I think the easiest way to find out information about that is to contact Magna Music Baton, the Studio 49 supplier in the country in St. Louis. They supply lists of workshops that are going on throughout the year, and also so many music magazines are making these known now and advertising a lot. But I highly recommend these teacher workshop training workshops. You go and you receive tons of material usually, and quite a bit of it is already printed out for you, and you sit there and you learn the technique of teaching it as well as receiving it. You're watching someone teach the process. And Orff is the process. It's and that's why it's so important, I think, to go work with a teacher rather than just read about Orff.
Are there any particular schools that use this method exclusively, or not? Or approach?
Not exclusively, but there are some schools. Memphis State University has a master's program with an emphasis in Orff. I teach an Orff class at Jacksonville University. Ball State University teaches many Orff classes with Arnold Burkhardt.
Intermediate, advanced,
yes.
And again, it's a year-round program. And this is happening at more and more institutions, as you pointed out.
You mentioned Arnold Burkhardt. I must insert the fact that he has a series of publications that come out called Keeping Up with Orff Schulwerk in America, in the United States.
Yes.
Those can be gotten through Keeping Up with Music Education in Muncie, Indiana. There's also, I would strongly recommend joining the American Orff Schulwerk Association, which can be reached at Cleveland, at the Department of Music at Cleveland State University, Cleveland, Ohio. in the magazine, the Orff Echo, which is put out by the AOSA on a quarterly basis. They have information about workshops, and they have many ideas for teaching in it. So the two best magazines that I know of are the Orff Echo, put out by the American Orff Schulwerk Association, and Arnold Burkhart's Keeping Up with Music Education in the Classroom.
And I think all of this supports the statement we made earlier about the impact that Orff is making on the teaching of music to children throughout the United States. And we don't want to forget that at the Orff Institute in Salzburg, this is a training institution for teachers, and anyone who's interested in going, they have English-speaking courses during the summer, and you will find teachers there who are learning this method, the system, from all over the world. So it's not just happening here in the United States. It's happening in Greece and Hungary, of course, and throughout not only Western Europe, but in the Orient and other places as well.
Go ahead.
I was going to mention that the Orff Institute in Salzburg has their summer 2-week course that's taught in English. They also have a winter semester course that starts, I believe, in October and goes in October through January or February. And that's a course that's also taught in English, another international course.
One thing I think that we don't want to do is to give anybody the impression that you can just have a 5-minute conversation about Orff Schulwerk and really understand it. It's nothing that you can capsulize in a few minutes for people. It's something you sort of have to live with, investigate. And for instance, I've heard people say, well, I went to a terrible workshop. And some guy came out here and talked about Orff, and it was boring, and he just talked or lectured for an hour and a half. Well, right away, it wasn't the system so much as it was the person who was presenting it. And I want to caution anybody that might quickly try to stereotype Orff, don't do it.
We also have been using the word Schulwerk, which could be very confusing to our audience. We might just point out that there's no literal translation of that word into English. The closest is school work.
Right. Do either of you have any particular comments of anything that we... Oh, well, one of the things I was thinking about before you comment here, I have heard of the Rudolf Steiner schools in Europe. In fact, there are some in the United States now called the Waldorf schools. And I have seen a film put out by the Waldorf organization that shows children actually going through Orff-type experiences with the percussion, mallet percussion type instruments and recorders, and eurythmics, a lot of movement. And do you have any awareness of this movement or not, or is this just something that I happen to stumble on?
Through the Waldorf school?
The Waldorf school. Yeah.
I can't really answer that. I don't know. Jim?
I've heard of it, but that's the extent of it.
Well, I'm trying to be sure we get everything out that we can about any particular organization or group that may be using this technique or approach.
You mentioned eurythmics. We have to say something about the Dalcroze approach to eurythmics here, because it does fit in very nicely, again, with what Carl Orff is trying to do, and through the movement and the participation type of activities.
I was thinking about one of the comments that I hear about from people saying that the Orff is fine, but who can afford all those instruments?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm really glad you mentioned that. You can be an Orff teacher and not have the instruments, because you can be doing movement activities, singing activities that begin with pentatonic and then develop from there. You can be using speech activities. You can be using hand percussion activities that don't require these xylophones and metallophones and glockenspiels. So there is a wide range of things that you can be doing with the children without having the beautiful Orff instruments. It's like really having icing on the cake if you have the Orff instruments. But you can be an Orff teacher and not have them.
Right. I think that's a good point, Jim. Let me emphasize that it would be highly desirable to try to get one Orff instrument as soon as possible, because the sound is really superior. They're very nice. It adds a new dimension to the total approach. And then as you prepare your budget over a 3 or 5 year plan, you put in more requests for instruments, and eventually, you'll have a half a dozen or more. And you don't need you don't need an instrument for every child. If you just have some representative instruments around, it does help. But it's certainly not a requirement.
I noticed that a lot of teachers kind of think that when I get out to teach, all I've got to do is sit behind a piano and play, and the children can sing. They have the idea that the piano is a good thing to hide behind, I guess. That isn't an Orff type teacher, right?
I think if we expect children to do the moving, we have to set a good example for them to let them know, and we can be good models. Dancing is very important with music training. So that's important, and also the children should see the teacher as a music maker. Of course, if they're playing the piano, they are music makers, but they can be music makers in all sorts of ways on other instruments as well.
But would the average teacher be able to arrange their own pieces fairly quickly with, say, a workshop, one summer workshop? Or would it take several courses, like you have level 1, level 2, level 3? Where do you start getting to where you can be proficient?
Hopefully the students in our class, we have a 1-week introductory class this week. Hopefully at the end of this week they will have some guidelines to follow, and they will be able to do it at least an elementary level. And then using their good musicianship, they can continue to improve. But continuing to take workshops helps with it.
Well, I certainly want to thank you all for sharing your ideas with us and sharing your enthusiasm, and we hope to find them back again at FAU and possibly next summer, and we can get more people, and get any of you people who are watching this or interested, keep in touch with us, and we'll try to keep you informed of any activities that we can to help you in teaching music to children.
May I say one word in summary? Do we have time?
Last.
Okay. Our feeling is that a music teacher has tremendous potential to affect the growth of children, because music encompasses so many disciplines, so many senses can be used at one time. So teachers, by using this, can really have an impact in their life. It's a nice feeling working in that way, to know that you can reach people.
That's a very good statement to end our program.
Right.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mary Helen.
Thank you, Ken.